Hello, this is Shmuel Moshe, and you are listening to the Weekly Parashahcast, the weekly Torah portion podcast where I read the weekly Torah portion and then provide my own interpretation based on the text. This week's Torah portion is Acharei Mot, or After the Death, referring to the death of Aaron's two sons, and it takes place on the Shabbat falling on the 26th of Nissan, 5784, May 4th, 2024. As always, I remind everyone I am not a professional Torah scholar, just somebody who wanted to study the Torah. With all that said, I'm going to go ahead and get started with chapter 16 of Vayikra, Leviticus, verse 1. You can follow along in English on Chabad.org. Let's begin. First portion, chapter 16, verse 1. And the Lord spoke to Moses after the death of Aaron's two sons, when they drew near before the Lord, and they died. And the Lord said to Moses, Speak to your brother Aaron that he should not come at all times into the holy within the dividing curtain, in front of the curtain that is upon the ark, so that he should not die, for I appear over the ark in a cloud. With this shall Aaron enter the holy, with a young bull for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering. He shall wear a holy linen shirt, and linen pants shall be upon his flesh, and he shall gird himself with a linen sash, and wear a linen cap. These are holy garments, and therefore he shall immerse himself in water and don them. And from the community of the children of Israel he shall take 2 he-goats as a sin offering, and 1 ram as a burnt offering. And Aaron shall bring his sin offering bull, and initiate atonement for himself and for his household. And he shall take the 2 he-goats, and place them before the Lord at the entrance to the tent of meeting. And Aaron shall place lots upon the 2 he-goats, 1 lot for the Lord, and the other lot for Azazel. And Aaron shall bring the he-goat upon which the lot for the Lord came up, and designate it as a sin offering. And the he-goat upon which the lot for Azazel came up shall be placed while still alive before the Lord, to initiate atonement upon it, and to send it away to Azazel in the desert. And Aaron shall bring his sin offering bull, and shall initiate atonement for himself and for his household, and he shall then slaughter his sin offering bull. And he shall take a pan full of burning coals from upon the altar, from before the Lord, and both hands full of fine incense, and bring it within the dividing curtain. And he shall place the incense upon the fire, before the Lord, so that the cloud of the incense shall envelop the ark cover that is over the tablets of testimony, so that he shall not die. And he shall take some of the bull's blood and sprinkle it, with his index finger on top of the ark cover on the eastern side, and before the ark cover he shall sprinkle 7 times from the blood with his index finger. He shall then slaughter the he-goat of the people's sin offering, and bring its blood within the dividing curtain. And he shall do with its blood as he had done with the bull's blood, and he shall sprinkle it upon the ark cover and before the ark cover. And he shall effect atonement upon the holy from the defilements of the children of Israel, and from their rebellions and all their unintentional sins. He shall do likewise to the tent of meeting, which dwells with them amidst their defilements. And no man shall be in the tent of meeting when he comes to effect atonement in the holy, until he comes out. And he shall effect atonement for himself, for his household, and for all the congregation of Israel. Alright, and that concludes the first portion, so quite a bit to cover here. First off, as I mentioned before, this is Acharei Mot, so this takes place after Aaron's 2 sons get killed, and now Aaron has to go and fulfill what will become, based on my understanding, the Yom Kippur sacrifice to redeem the people of their sins, right? So he's going to take these 2 goats after he does all the step-by-step, the holy garments, making sure he's clean, and he's going to take these 2 goats, and he's basically going to coin toss them. He's going to draw lots, one of them for the Lord, and the other one for Azazel. Now, I was curious, and so I did something I almost never have done for this show before, but I wanted to make sure I understood what Azazel was. So I did a little bit of just a quick cursory search, and Azazel has been defined as a spirit or entity that exists out there in the wilderness, maybe some bad energy. And so in this case, what seems to be happening is that one of the goats is being designated as a sacrifice to the Lord, and the other is being offered up to Azazel, or being set off toward Azazel. Now, Azazel could be interpreted as an actual being, or Azazel is more of a concept of the misfortune of the dangerous wilderness. And as we'll learn more about, there is some process to the actual sacrifice of these goats and how it goes down. But nonetheless, interesting to me is the fact that it's designated to be for Azazel into the desert versus just saying, cut into the wilderness or whatever. No, it's designated as for Azazel. So it's a very specific designation. That means it's not simply this thing is set free, but rather you're almost willing the misfortunes upon this thing which you are saying is for Azazel. Very interesting to me, but as it says at the end here, he shall effect atonement upon the holy from the defilements of the children of Israel and from their rebellions and all their unintentional sins, likewise to the tent of meeting which dwells up with them amidst their defilements. So very much a matter of, we're doing this to absolve the people of their sins. Moving on to the second portion, chapter 16 of Leviticus, verse 18. And he shall then go out to the altar that is before the Lord, and effect atonement upon it. He shall take some of the bull's blood, and some of the he-goat's blood, and place it on the horns of the altar around. He shall then sprinkle some of the blood upon it with his index finger 7 times, and he shall cleanse it, and sanctify it of the defilements of the children of Israel. And he shall finish effecting atonement for the holy, the tent of meeting, and the altar, and then he shall bring the live he-goat. And Aaron shall lean both of his hands forcefully upon the live he-goat's head, and confess upon it all the willful transgressions of the children of Israel, all their rebellions, and all their unintentional sins. And he shall place them on the he-goat's head, and send it off to the desert with a timely man. The he-goat shall thus carry upon itself all their sins to a precipitous land, and he shall send off the he-goat into the desert. And Aaron shall enter the tent of meeting, and remove the linen garments that he had worn when he came into the holy, and there he shall store them away. And he shall immerse his flesh in a holy place, and don his garments. He shall then go out and sacrifice his burnt offering, and the people's burnt offering, and he shall effect atonement for himself and for the people. So clarifying on this once again, we have the standard sacrifice process, and how the hand is leaned on the head, but also we see this portion, after he speaks all of the sins, we then see the goat that is brought to a precipitous land. So this can be understood as a really dangerous high cliff sort of area, right? Precipitous. And the timely man shall go with it. So this is basically Aaron is doing the stuff back at the altar, while a person who has been chosen, who is going to do the job right, to take the goat out to the cliffside, basically, and send it off. And this may be a pretty way of saying guide the goat off of the cliff to fall into its misfortune and take all the sins with it. It's not a very pleasant sight, but it is a precipitous land, so prepare accordingly. In any case, between doing these two things, it should effect atonement for himself and the people when Aaron is done with his side of the bargain. Now on to the third portion, chapter 16, verse 25. And he shall cause the fat of the sin offering to go up in smoke on the altar. And the person who sent off the he-goat to Azazel shall immerse his garments and immerse his flesh in water, and after this he may come into the camp. And the sin offering bull and he-goat of the sin offering, both of whose blood was brought to effect atonement in the holy, he shall take outside the camp, and they shall burn in fire their hides, their flesh, and their waste. And the person who burns them shall immerse his garments and immerse his flesh in water, and after this he may come into the camp. And all this shall be an eternal statute for you. In the 7th month, on the 10th of the month, you shall afflict yourselves, and you shall not do any work, neither the native nor the stranger who dwells among you. For on this day he shall effect atonement for you to cleanse you. Before the Lord you shall be cleansed from all your sins. It is a Sabbath of rest for you, and you shall afflict yourselves. It is an eternal statute. And the Kohen who is anointed or who is invested to serve in his father's stead shall effect this atonement, and he shall don the linen garments, the holy garments, and he shall effect atonement upon the Holy of Holies, and he shall effect atonement upon the tent of meeting, and upon the altar, and he shall effect atonement upon the Kohanim, and upon all the people of the congregation. All this shall be as an eternal statute for you, to effect atonement upon the children of Israel for all their sins once each year. And he did as the Lord had commanded Moses. So just to confirm, once the man comes back, he also cleans himself off properly and can return to the camp. So he basically has to wash himself of the impurities of his deed. He needs to wash that away, at least in my interpretation or understanding of this. And continuing on, this entire process is an eternal statute, so it must be honored. And it specifically says on the 7th month, the 10th of that month. So this is Yom Kippur. Keep in mind the 6th month, or rather the 7th month, right? The first 6 months out of the 12 start with the calendar date is Nissan 1, right? For the first of Nissan. So that would be the first day of the calendar, whereas 6 months go by. On the 7th month is Rosh Hashanah, right? So that's the first day of the year, but the months started like this is a really weird way to explain how time works according to the biblical testimony here. But a normal calendar year does not start with Nissan. It starts after 6 months go by. The second half of the year is actually where the clock started. So just imagine Moses and them were given the calendar, and God said, listen, technically it's currently the middle of the year. So the stuff I'm telling you to do this on the equivalent of January 1st rather than the beginning of Nissan, because Nissan is actually the middle of the year. It's just that I'm starting you guys in the middle of the year. But from after this year, the 7th month is technically where you'll do Rosh Hashanah. So with that in mind, 10 days after that is Yom Kippur. It is a holy day, a Sabbath. Don't do anything. Afflict yourselves. And don't forget it. Eternal statute. Make sure you do it. So this is probably one of the most important things because it's the only way to remove the sin from the people. On to the fourth portion. Chapter 17, verse 1. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to Aaron and to his sons, and to all the children of Israel, and say to them, This is the thing the Lord has commanded, saying, Any man of the house of Israel who slaughters an ox, a lamb, or a goat inside the camp, or who slaughters outside the camp, but does not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to offer up as a sacrifice to the Lord before the Mishkan of the Lord, this shall be counted for that man as blood. He has shed blood, and that man shall be cut off from among his people. In order that the children of Israel should bring their offerings which they slaughter on the open field, and bring them to the Lord, to the entrance of the tent of meeting, to the Kohen, and slaughter them as peace offerings to the Lord. And the Kohen shall dash the blood upon the altar of the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and he shall cause the fat to go up in smoke as a pleasing fragrance to the Lord. And they shall no longer slaughter their sacrifices to the satyrs after which they stray. This shall be an eternal statute for them, for all their generations. So this is pertaining to the slaughtering of animals, right? So any man who slaughters an ox, a lamb, or a goat inside the camp, or who slaughters outside the camp, but does not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to offer up as a sacrifice, basically, this is going to be counted as bloodshed. So in other words, if you're not going to do it for the holy reasons, then we're just going to say that you're doing it, you're shedding blood, and then you've broken a rule. So, interestingly, it specifies that this is to also prevent it from being sacrificed incorrectly or worse to something else, right? It mentions to the satyrs, as in satyr, I assume is referring to the mythological half man, half goat thing going on, where they got like the bottom half of a deer or a goat and the top half of a human. So in other words, this is something that's a non-human thing that people would worship, after which they stray. So this is to help people stay in line and not sacrifice to the wrong things. We make sure that they bring their sacrifices to the holy place, and therefore we can keep it nice and clean and kosher. On to the fifth portion, chapter 17, verse 8. And you should say to them, Any man of the house of Israel, or of the strangers who will sojourn among them, who offers up a burnt offering or any other sacrifice, but does not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to make it a sacrifice to the Lord, that man shall be cut off from his people. And any man of the house of Israel, or of the strangers that sojourn among them, who eats any blood, I will set my attention upon the soul who eats the blood, and I will cut him off from among his people. For the soul of the flesh is in the blood, and I have therefore given it to you to be placed upon the altar, to atone for your souls, for it is the blood that atones for the soul. Therefore I said to the children of Israel, None of you shall eat blood, and the stranger who sojourns among you shall not eat blood. And any man of the children of Israel, or of the strangers who sojourn among them, who traps a quarry of a wild animal or bird that may be eaten, and sheds its blood, he shall cover the blood with dust. For regarding the soul of all flesh, its blood is in its soul. And I said to the children of Israel, You shall not eat the blood of any flesh, for the soul of any flesh is its blood, all who eat it shall be cut off. And any person, whether a native or a stranger, who eats carrion or what was torn, shall immerse his garments and immerse himself in the waters, and shall remain unclean until evening. But then he shall become clean. But if he does not immerse his garments or immerse his flesh, he shall bear his sin. Chapter 18, verse 1, And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, I am the Lord your God. Like the practice of the land of Egypt in which you dwelled, you shall not do. And like the practice of the land of Canaan, to which I am bringing you, you shall not do. And you shall not follow their statutes. You shall fulfill my ordinances and observe my statutes to follow them. I am the Lord your God. You shall observe my statutes and my ordinances, which a man shall do and live by them. I am the Lord. Thus concludes the fifth portion. So here we have some details continuing, as we talked about this before, right? The offering of a sacrifice, right? If it's not done at the holies, or if it's not done properly, if they do a burnt sacrifice not at the tent of meeting, then that person's soul gets cut off from the people. And people who eat blood, same thing. Your soul gets cut off, whether you're a proper child of Israel or you are a person who's just dwelling in the land, you will be cut off from the people. And the reason for this is that God says that the soul is in the blood, right? And so by consuming blood, you are basically desecrating this soul in some capacity. You're doing something wrong. The soul of all flesh, its blood is in its soul. And this is also tying back to the importance of things like all the way back to Noah, the significance of the blood and the animals, but also we have an animal that's perhaps like roadkill, right? Carrion. So it's already dead. A person who eats this, or an animal that's already, maybe its flesh is already removed, whatever, it's torn, that person is made unclean by eating it, but can be cleaned and purified by immersing himself, and then at night he then becomes clean again. But if he doesn't do that, then he shall bear his sin. So in other words, as long as he follows the rules, he'll be temporarily unclean. But if not only is he going to remain unclean, but he's going to carry that sin will be on his shoulders. Now with that, we also get a commandment in chapter 18 saying, you're going to follow not the way of the Egyptians, not the way of the Canaanites. Do things the way I'm telling you to do, my statutes, my ordinances, because I'm the Lord. Sixth portion, chapter 18, verse 6. No man shall come near to any of his close relatives to uncover their nakedness. I am the Lord. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father or the nakedness of your mother. She is your mother. You shall not uncover her nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father's wife. It is your father's nakedness. The nakedness of your sister, whether your father's daughter or your mother's daughter, whether born to one who may remain in the home or born to one who must be sent outside, you shall not uncover their nakedness. The nakedness of your son's daughter or your daughter's daughter, you shall not uncover their nakedness, for they are your own nakedness. The nakedness of the daughter of your father's wife, born to your father, she is your sister, you shall not uncover her nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father's sister, she is the close relative of your father. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your mother's sister, for she is the close relative of your mother. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father's brother, you shall not come near his wife, she is your aunt. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your daughter-in-law, she is your son's wife, you shall not uncover her nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your brother's wife. It is your brother's nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of a woman and her daughter. You shall not take in marriage her son's daughter or her daughter's daughter to uncover her nakedness. They are close relatives. It is evil counsel. And you shall not take a woman with her sister in marriage as rivals to uncover the nakedness of one upon the other in her lifetime. And to a woman during the uncleanness of her separation, you shall not come near to uncover her nakedness. You shall not lie carnally with your neighbor's wife to become defiled by her. And you shall not give any of your offspring to pass through for Molech. And you shall not profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. So, sixth portion concludes. This is basically the no incest of any kind portion, insofar as it has to do with anybody who can be considered an immediate relative, or the spouses of an immediate relative, or the children of an immediate relative. So kind of looking at where are the boundaries here, well, we have, in the case of Abraham, right, that's kind of, I guess, the upper limit there, but now God is giving us very clear instructions. This is what is not allowed, don't do that. And even if you want to get clever about it, nope, don't do it. Same thing, even something as simple as two sisters, right? And for the sake of making them rivals to want to please their husband, like making them do things that are wrong, like don't do that. Also, a mention of those who marry into the family, they are your relatives now. And also, it mentions not lying with your neighbor's wife to become defiled by her. So, it's interesting, like, that she would be the one defiling you, right? If you were the one committing the deed. But it really comes across that these commands are specifically for men to follow. And, the phrasing is whatever you want to make it. Ultimately, we could try to understand, why does it say to become defiled by her? Maybe it's a statement about the woman or just the act itself, but I also think of like Adam and Eve. That's an interesting case of man and woman. It really doesn't matter. Point is, don't do it. You as a man have authority over your own behavior. You have enough sense of dominion over yourself that, especially in this context, in this time, women didn't have that level of authority that men necessarily did as masters of the house and so on. So it's just an expectation of men to behave a certain way, though women, of course, would heed these same rules, right? Don't break the rules by going in the other direction. Don't facilitate anything that would violate these commandments. Now, interestingly, the last two things here are not about that. The first is, you shall not give any of your offspring to pass through for Molech. So this is very interesting. This is referring to child sacrifice. And for Molech in particular was a prominent deity, I assume, at the time. I've also seen this translated as through the fires for Molech. So in other words, don't sacrifice your children. And then, you shall not profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. So this is also very important. Do not profane the name of God. Just don't do it. Now we get into the seventh portion, chapter 18, verse 22. You shall not lie down with a male as with a woman. This is an abomination. And with no animal shall you cohabit, to become defiled by it. And a woman shall not stand in front of an animal to cohabit with it. This is depravity. You shall not defile yourselves by any of these things, for the nations whom I am sending away from before you have defiled themselves with all these things. And the land became defiled, and I visited its sin upon it, and the land vomited out its inhabitants. But as for you, you shall observe my statutes and my ordinances, and you shall not do like any of these abominations, neither the native nor the stranger who sojourns among you. For the people of the land who preceded you did all of these abominations, and the land became defiled. And let the land not vomit you out for having defiled it, as it vomited out the nation that preceded you. For anyone who commits any of these abominations, the persons doing so shall be cut off from the midst of their people. And you shall observe my charge, not to commit any of the abominable practices that were done before you, and you shall not become defiled by them. I am the Lord your God. So here we are in the seventh portion. Now we have a few more prohibitions, forbidden relations, right? So the first here, do not lie down with a male as with a woman. This is an abomination. So homosexual male relations. And then also, with no animal shall you cohabit to become defiled by it. And no woman shall stand in front of an animal to cohabit with it. This is depravity. So the word cohabit, I think, is we want to make sure we clarify what this means. Right? So cohabitation in the context when it describes a woman standing in front of an animal, now we can use that context clue. This is also referring to bestiality. So don't partake with animals in such a way. So in other words, I guess if the goat happens to walk into the house, and leave and whatever, like that's not the same as what this is describing. It's talking about behaviors with the animal. So don't do that. All right. So I was thinking about this particularly. Why did I fixate on this? Because it says cohabit, like, well, a lot of people have a pet dog or a pet cat or whatever that lives in the house, right? But what it means by that is not just sharing the same domicile. It means the act. You shall not defile yourselves by any of those things. So basically what it's saying here, the nations that currently inhabit the land of the Canaanites and all that, they have been partaking in these forbidden things, and that's why they're being cast out. And so you don't repeat their mistake, or I'm going to cast you out too for defiling the land. And that's my warning to you. Don't do it. Don't be defiled. I am the Lord. And there you have it. So there we have Acharei Mot, a very long list of important things. I do want to give one sort of closing remark about this, right? So seventh portion again, the section about, you shall not lie down with a male as with a woman. This is an abomination. I think it's very interesting. It specifically refers to lying down with someone. And I once heard the description, people identifying with their sexuality is a very important part of who they are, right? They are attracted to some type of people, not other type of people. But the specific prohibition here is to lay with that person as they would with a woman. So I think the significance is, it's not necessarily that a person can't love emotionally, but to act upon emotions or anything, to act in a physical way, is where the prohibition lies. So in other words, the physical relation is where there's a prohibition. So by doing the physical act, that's where you cross the line. In other words, this is me saying to anybody who may have those kinds of thoughts, who may be, exploring those kinds of things, right? There's a difference between those who think and feel something versus those who act upon what is essentially a carnal lust action. And I think that's where, if a person was reading this or hearing this and they are concerned about their sexuality, that this is me saying, hey, according to what this says here, if you don't act upon it physically, you're safe, right? That's kind of the, that's kind of the saving grace. If you maybe you can't help the way you feel, but you could still choose how to physically act. So that's my conclusion there. A bit of a critical difference, right, when we talk about all these sorts of things, but I do think it's important to understand what is the meaning of the text. After all, we are all driven in some way or another to do things that are not necessarily in accordance with what the commandments say, right? Just like a person could have a thought of any kind to do something that is improper. Same thing with the relations earlier, talking about incest and things like that. Is one thing. Maybe why is this prohibition there, right? It's because these things happen. Therefore, by saying what's not allowed, don't uncover their nakedness, right? Well, that just makes a whole bunch of other things now no longer possible to commit the sin. So by not allowing the circumstances to come about where the sin can take place, you protect yourself from committing the sin and are therefore safe, even if there's a compulsion to steal, to adulter, to whatever. If you don't act upon it, you're good. So really, it's like they say, hate the sin, not the sinner. In some cases, right? In my case, I'm saying avoid the sin even if you think like a sinner, and you'll be okay. In any case, that's the end of this portion. Quite a lot here, and a whole lot for Aaron to have to deal with in the following, wake of his two sons. But also, we look at. I think it's kind of interesting that Aaron does this when he does, because it happening after that almost to me seems like he's also redeeming the souls of his sons who committed the sin and died. This entire act, it's very important timing-wise, right? The timing matters, because without that timing, the two sons would not have their redemption kind of bundled up with the rest of the people. But that's just my overall thought. In any case, I hope you found this very educational. I was also very interested in the Azazel stuff, as I mentioned before. This is quite a powerful portion, this whole Acharei Mot, one of the arguably the most important in modern day for thinking about the ways that people can try to live in accordance with the commandments. Until next time, I hope you've got plenty to think about. This has been Shmuel Moshe with the Weekly Parashahcast. Thank you for listening, and I hope you'll tune in again. Until then, this is Shmuel Moshe signing off. Baruch Hashem.